My name is Charles Tony G. I was born in 1940, October the 7th, in the city of Alexandria. And I've lived in Alexandria most of my life. I'm presently living in a home that I built or refurbished in 1980, so we've been there for 34 years. My wife is also retired, so we both serve the church. That's our only occupation, and the greatest of all the occupations is working in the church. Alexandria, to me, is the greatest city that I've ever been in, simply because in Alexandria, I've found that people, scores of people, would help you if they were convinced that you wanted to help yourself. It was here in Alexandria that I met my surrogate parents, Salvador and Ruth Gallardi, whom I called Dad. It was Taylor Burke Jr., CEO of Burke and Herbert Bank, that helped me with business ventures and securing properties, and that opened the doors also. It was here in Alexandria that I found in people a willingness to help that made me feel, especially Carl Hales and Dr. John Stubbings, that made me feel that I wanted to be both visible and a viable force in my contributions to the city of Alexandria, because I had to give back to all that I've received. I was born here in Alexandria, 1940, October the 7th. I started 1 year at Alaus Kraut School in 1946, and then moved to Southwest Washington, where I went to school at Anthony Barn. And I stayed there until I was 11 years old and moved out of the alleys of Southwest Washington, which was very depressing and a very difficult time and a lot of hardships. I moved from there to South Ozone Park in Jamaica, New York, with my uncle and aunt. And my life was radically changed simply because they lived on an upper middle strata. And all of a sudden, I was given an allowance each week, and I was signed up for voice lessons. I took voice lessons and a little bit of theatric opportunities, and I attended St. Clemens Catholic School. And I was there for 2 years, and for some reason, I just could not get acclimated. My brothers and sister, still in Southwest Washington, did not have any of the opportunities that I was experiencing. So I wanted to come back to Washington. Came back to Washington, moved over here to Alexandria, where we stayed at 500 block of South Columbus Street. And then I went to live with Mr. and Mrs. Jones in Amelia County, where I was taught on the farm, and I was taught farm life. And I went to Russell Grove High School, played in the state championship in 1956 at Charlottesville, and I wanted to leave from Amelia County to come back to Alexandria. Coming back to Alexandria is where I came back to Alexandria in 1956, worked with my stepfather in General Wrecking Company for almost a year, and was able to get employed by S.J. Galati and Ruth Galati. And that was in 1957. And there my life was changed completely. I started to go to church. I was not raised in a religious family, and consequently I never went to church until I met the Galatis. My mother and father-in-law were friends to a gentleman who worked next door to the snack bar, Lindsay Nicholson Auto Supplies, who told my mother-in-law about a job at the snack bar. And I went, and Mr. Galati interviewed me and said that I could start the next day. And that was in 1957, the latter part of 57. And I worked in the snack bar for 28 years. Again, Ruth and Dad. Dad and I would come in around 3 o'clock in the morning and would do prep work for our day. We were able to serve, according to the health department, the number that we gave them, we were able to serve anywhere from 500 to 600 people a day. It was a fast food, breakfast and lunch is all we did. We closed at 3 o'clock, if you can believe that. But we were open at 5 and closed at 3. And Dad and I worked together in the morning. Ruth would come in around 7 and start with the book work and so forth. And the other folks would come in around 8. And, but he and I worked together, and I said surrogate parents, but they were the only parents I really knew. My mother died at the age of 43. My younger brother had an accident on Suitland Parkway and was killed at the age of 15. And in both instances, Dad and Ruth stood shoulder to shoulder with me in the responsibilities of the burial because there were no insurance. But it was a love affair that I had not known, and then later I would learn that Italians are very demonstrative, and that was true. Dad hugged me, the first man that ever hugged me. At 17, I boxed in the Golden Gloves in Washington, D.C., and I was 190 pounds. So when he put his arms around me, I was flabbergasted. No man had ever done that. And then, to get more personal, Dad kissed me on one jaw and then on the other side. I knew that I was okay, and I was just hoping he was okay. And, but that was the demonstrativeness of the man. And on Saturdays, he and Ruth would take Jean and our 3 children in looking for homes. We wanted to come out of Southeast Washington, is where we were staying, 6th and Mississippi Avenue, Southeast. And we found a place down in Dale City. And I went back the next week without Dad, without my lawyer, Jean and I, and we signed a contract. And that's where I raised our children. We were there from 1970 to 1980. 1980 is when we moved to Alexandria and bought the property on the corners of Alfred and Orinoco Street, and then the church. My surrogate parents were Italians, and because I've never seen my biological father in my life, Mr. Galati, whom I would call Dad, said something to me that affected a real change in my life. He said, "Tony, take the chip off of your shoulder. The world doesn't owe you anything. It extends to you an opportunity. Based on what you do with that opportunity will determine where you're going in life. Ruth and I have no children. We would like to teach you the business. We'd like to help you through school and let you go on from there." And that changed my life. Or really, if I should say correctly, it gave a meaning to life. At that time in my life, I wasn't quite sure of the definition between existence and life. And after being in the fellowship and working with Dad and Ruth for almost 28 years, it changed my life. Dad expired in 1970. After the service, I met Dr. John Stubbings from the Alexandria school system, and Carl Hales, who was vice president of the Alexandria National Bank. The two of them convinced me that I needed to get out into the community more. They were the ones who signed my application to join the JCs. That was in 1970, and I was there until 1980. There I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce and worked on several of their boards with several of the people there. And in 1981, I was asked to join the Legal Aid, Alexandria Legal Aid Society, where I served as treasurer for 8 years. And had a lot of fun and met a lot of people. 1983, I think it was, I was asked to join the Criminal Justice Advisory Commission and became the first African American to join that council, and it represented 9 counties here in the Northern Virginia area. And it was a privilege to be with Commonwealth attorneys, judges, and police chiefs from the various counties. That was a very learning experience for me and great exposure simply because at the time I was working in the jail systems, and that helped tremendously. I never tried to play lawyer, however, but I had a lot of fun trying to encourage men that when they would make their reentry into society, trying to help them with some positive perspectives. Then later, I was asked to join the most prestigious of the boards here in Alexandria, the Alexandria Hospital, as a trustee. Again, I served for 7 years on that prestigious board. In 1985, I was asked by the special assistant to President Ronald Reagan if the snack bar would undertake to supply the food for his second inaugural. And then I was told that we had won out over the largest catering company in the metropolitan area, and Michael Deaver had had lunch a number of times at our snack bar. And we said yes. And that was a great opportunity and great exposure because we were housed over in the Park Police facility over right adjacent to the Navy Yard, and I was told 6,000 or more people would be coming through there on a daily basis. I was able to put together a team of about 12 associates. Never called anyone an employee. They were associates working hand in hand with me. And needless to say, that was one of the greatest exposures in the food business that I'd ever had. In fact, after we finished our tenure there, from October of 1980, October of 1984 through February of 1985. And you probably remember that in 1985, it was too cold to have the inaugural on the outside, so we had to serve it in the convention center in Washington, D.C., where we delivered food constantly, twice a day. In fact, they wanted, they wanted me to keep that facility open for 24 hours, and I just said I couldn't do it. But we did keep it open for 18 hours, and during that whole tenure, I got less than 4 hours sleep a night. In 1985, my surrogate mother, Ruth Galati, passed. And that was quite an experience for me. She and Dad were, I said surrogate parents. They were my parents, and I was loved by them, and I loved them. In 1985, my fourth opportunity was meeting Taylor Burke Jr. of Burke and Herbert Bank. And the relationship, I will never forget. Mr. Burke was an unusual man, I would go in and talk with him, and he would close the door and we would talk 15, 20 minutes each time I would go in. And in talking with him, I noticed that he would journal. And as a result of that, for more than 25 years, I journal every day because I picked that up from Mr. Burke. And one of the highlights of my association with Taylor Burke was he asked me if we could go into partnership. In the vernacular of the streets, that blew my mind. This man wanted to go into partnership with me, and we're going to buy the 500 block of North Henry Street on the east side, which was right across from the new post office that they had just built there. And of the 5 buildings, 4 of the people said yes. Also, what was amazing and challenging to me, he wanted me to do the negotiations. Now, Mr. Burke obviously knew more than I would learn in 4 or 5 lifetimes, but he wanted me to do the negotiations, and I did so. And 4 other people agreed on the price that I offered, except for one. And that one person, because he and his wife would not sell that property to us at the price I offered, and he wanted much more than I was offering, I was not privileged to have had what I would have called one of the greatest opportunities. Dad and Ruth was the first, but Taylor Burke was an unusual man. In fact, I used the language just 3 or 4 years ago. The Washington Post did an article on Taylor Burke and myself. And I used a Latin word in describing Mr. Burke. I said he was sui generis, which means, the 7th Collegian Webster's Dictionary says, no other of its kind. Therefore, Mr. Burke was one of a kind to me. When Ruth died in January of 1985, I became the president of the Snack Bar, Inc. In that same year, I started the G&S Developers, where we would buy buildings, renovate them, and sell them. We were able to build a restaurant in the 1100 block of King Street called the Daily Catch. That was the largest project we undertook in building. And I purchased several properties, and each time Mr. Burke was more than willing to loan the money and to make the loan rather. And that was amazing to me. Then in 203, I joined the Alexandria Kiwanis Club. 204, because I guess the evening I was absent at that meeting, I was voted in as the president of the Alexandria Kiwanis Club, which was a great undertaking, and I had a lot of fun, met a lot of people. And then there was this article in the Journal newspaper that there was a serious problem with the guest house. I'm not sure, but I think it said pilfering, and the administrator had done some other things that was wrong. And I went over and talked with him. And as president of the Alexandria Kiwanis Club, he agreed that he was moving out, and the building was in serious need for renovation. So I partnered with Habitat of Humanity and they wanted me to be the house man. So I was the house man, and yet I had, at that time, the snack bar, that I'd purchased a building on Monroe and Windsor Avenue because 107 had been sold. I was renovating that. I had just completed the home that I live in at 830 Orinoco Street, but I'd also purchased a building in the 527 North Alpha Street. I was in the process of renovating that. And then with the guest house project, that took more of my time. I've always been a person that didn't need much sleep, 3 or 4 hours a night. The only person that I knew that got less sleep than I was Councilman R. Robinson, who happened to have been the first African-American city councilman for Alexandria. And he and I would get together and talk. In fact, we went out to Chicago to a couple meetings, and he said that he basically got about 3.5 hours sleep a night. And the 7.5 years of going through school at night and different studies that I was doing, I realized that I didn't get much more than 3 to 4 hours sleep. But it was encouraging. I met a lot of people. My life was changed. Coupled with this was I was a pastor of Third Baptist Church, later became the pastor of Mount Olive Baptist Church after 4 years at Third Baptist at Princess and Patrick Streets. I went down to Wilderness, Virginia. My wife and I were still living on Orinoco Street, and I drove down there, which like 75 miles, and I pastored Pilgrim Baptist Church and Chestnut Grove Baptist Church, first and third Sundays, second and fourth Sundays. And in 2002, I gave my resignation. Also, that I didn't mention, I should mention, was that while at Third Baptist, not only did I serve as chaplain for the City of Alexandria jail system, I also taught at the Saturday College at Douglas Hall on the campus of Howard University for 4 years. And that was on Saturdays only. But also, I taught in the adult educational program for the Washington Bible College, where I went to school, for 7.5 years. These were theological courses, as you understand. And so I had a very busy life. And I stayed from the church for about 3 years. And then in Chestnut Grove in 2008, asked if I would come and serve as pastor. I'd been there for 4 years previously, from 75 to 80, before I came up to Third Baptist Church. And I said no, I couldn't. They called me a second time, and interviewed me, and at that second meeting, I said yes. And I'm presently serving Chestnut Grove Baptist Church as pastor. Meanwhile, my neighbor across the street mentioned to me Living Legends. And realizing that I had not been active in my city, though I live here, for almost 10 years, I thought I would reintegrate myself into the community, and Living Legends is just a great opportunity to help. My highest conception in life at the age of 73 is to give back or to pass on to others the things that scores of people have offered me and the advantages and opportunities that I've had. I'm waiting seriously for my book to come out, because that has been a 2.5-year project. Things that I didn't necessarily want to share, I've shared. I've traveled extensively. I've been on four different continents. I've traveled around the United States twice by way of train, and one the north sector and then the other the southern sector. 11 days each trip. This was in 2008. Jean and I was celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary. I say sometime in church, I took her to Wolf Trap to see B.B. King, and I said to folks in church, which they thought was rather comical, but it's true. Every time I would hear B.B. King sing Sweet 16, I'd go ballistic, for that's the age that I met my wife. But in Africa, standing in front of Victoria Falls, I just wanted to write something, and this is what I wrote. November the 8th, 2008. If Africa is the cradle of all civilization, as I have heard, then the waters running over Victoria Falls and the mist that rises above the falls, that the African people call the White Thunder, is the most extraordinary sight in all of God's cosmos. When I stood there at Victoria Falls. We have a second home in Madison County. That's where we serve the church, in Brightwood, Madison. And I was on my tractor. I had 4.5 acres. I was on my tractor, and it was in October, early October. My birthday is in October. and the leaves were falling from the trees. And I was inspired. So I got off my tractor, dashed into the house, took a pen, and I wrote these words. When I observe the seasons in the year, I love autumn, not because it is the month of my birth, not simply because of the alpine breeze that whistles while passing by, not even because of the fresh coolness in ascendancy combined with nature's clarity on display. But I love autumn most of all because it is though God display for our enjoyment as well as our enrichment, his manifold wisdom. This is seen in the magnificence of the indescribable coloration in the leaves of autumn. One of the most breathless, one is almost breathless and speechless because of nature's exhibition God has so manifestly given. And I thank him, not alone for his gift, but allowing me the perception and appreciation. After I made the contribution financially and physically in working with Habitat of America in the renovation of the guest house, one evening, and my lawyer, Harry P. Hart, who's also a living legend, brought coffee to me around 12 o'clock. I stayed all night long in the actual wiring of that building. I'm a certified electrician, and that's one of the contributions that I made to this city. And when it was over with, I walked away. We were able to change, the Alexandria Kiwanis Club was able to put a plaque on the building. 3 weeks ago or so, I drove past and I didn't see the plaque, but my wife and daughter frequently take clothes over there for the women there, and what a great job they're doing. The other contribution I made in this city that I'd like to just say briefly was the evening that H. Rap Brown came to this city with Catfish Mayfield. And I, with Councilman R. Robinson, had talked to both gentlemen, and then I was later I took them both home. And when I returned to the city, trash cans, R. Robinson and myself walked through this city around Royal and Cameron Street, picking up trash cans that had been turned over in the streets. It was then that I had read an article concerning the late great professor of Maryland State by the name of Ron Walters, who said, as a leadership scholar, I have always felt that of all of the characteristics of leadership, the courage to act was the most important. The courage to act produces the pressure for change, and it always will. This is one of the laws of the use of power. And as a result, we were involved. And we did it without any fanfare. We did it because it was a job that needed to be done, and someone had to do it. One of the things that makes my being here today possible is something that Nelson Mandela said. Prior to his death, I had purchased 5 books that was written by him because we stewarded and were able, while we were in South Africa for a month at Robben Island. And what he said that was so impressive in one of the books I read, that have made a difference in my life was and is to be better than we can imagine for ourselves. To expect more of ourselves, we must exceed our own expectation. I've tried to make that part of my lifestyle. He also said, we must be hungry for greatness, not for self-aggrandizement, but to make a contribution where we are. And that's what I'm doing in joining. That's the reason why I joined Living Legends, to make a difference. What was reported in the paper several weeks ago, right after his death, as we went over to the statue on Massachusetts Avenue, in the Washington Post, it said that Mandela said, people, I hope I will not be remembered by my successes, but by the times I had fallen and was able to get back up. And that runs hand in glove with what Albert Einstein said years ago when I read the quote. And again, I incorporated it in my own being when he said, do not be a man of success, but a man of value. And that has helped me tremendously. Lastly, Marianne Williamson, in her book, Return to Love, often attributed to Nelson Mandela, who, contrary to internet legend, did not give this quote in his inaugural address, when she wrote, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be? Brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people will not feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not in just some of us. It is in everyone. And as we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates